My usual announcements. My paper is Strathmore watercolor paper. This is just a 9x12 pad. This is like $5 or $7 from the art store, so this is something I recommend. Here's what the front looks like. This is something I recommend if you want some watercolor paper. It is really not much of an investment, and it works pretty well. My paints are Winsor & Newton watercolor paints. These are professional paints. You do not need professional paints for your painting. I'm just telling you what I use. And then for our paint brushes, these are Princeton Neptune brushes. I've had these for about 2 years. I love them very much. They hold up really well. So these are a little bit more of an investment when you first start, but because they last so long and they hold up so well, I think it's worth it. So all of my materials, these and everything that I've tried before in my life that I like, are all linked in my bio. I have a tab in there called Art Supply Recommendations. So if you're looking for any art supply recommendations from me, that's where you can go check that out. And I earn a little commission off of that, so that's very nice. I love your nails. Thank you so much. I just did them yesterday. And happy birthday in 6 days to you. How do you find the pigment is in that set? I like it a lot. It's probably the best watercolors I've ever used. Okay, so the kind of general idea here, I don't have a reference photo for you, but we are going to do kind of a gradient from dark blue up at the top to a sand color down at the bottom here. And then over the top of that, we're going to add the wave details. Now, for the wave details, you will need some sort of opaque white paint. It does not have to be gouache. That is what I'm using, but if you have some acrylic white paint, if you just have like a white gel pen, white out, anything like that, that will work great. If you don't have any of that, you can always just save this painting up until what we do to start the waves, and then you can do it later. You can finish it later when you do have some white paint. So I will let you know when we start to use that, but that's not until later in the tutorial. The first thing that we're going to do to get started here is put a little bit of water in each of our paints, especially if you're using dry paint, but you can do this as well if you're using tube paint that is already wet. It just keeps it from drying out. And this just helps dissolve these colors. We will probably not use all of them, but it's good to just have them ready just in case. And also, this is what I usually say before these tutorials. This is just a fun time for us to paint together. We are not trying to make a masterpiece here. I like painting with you guys, and I like to teach you some things. So as long as you learn something and you have fun, that is all that we care about for today. We're not trying to make a masterpiece. So don't worry about how your painting turns out. Be gentle with yourself. Please be nice in the comments. Be nice to me, and we'll all have a lovely time for about an hour. Okay? So now that these paints have soaked a little bit, we're going to make our colors. So we're going to do the entire watercolor background in one kind of go, and we want all of these colors to blend together. So we need to make 4 colors, and we're going to make them all now so that we can put them down on the paper one after the other. So the first one is we need a dark blue. I have an indigo in my palette, and so that's already you can see a pretty dark blue. So I'm just going to use that. If you don't have one, just mix together blue and black, and that will get you a nice dark blue. Now we do want to add a little bit of water to these colors, so I'm just kind of going back and forth between the color in my palette and adding a little bit of water so that we have enough to cover our paper. But we don't want it to be too watered down. We want this to be a fairly strong color because we're just doing this in one go, so we want this to be a pretty, we want it to be pretty saturated. So there's our dark blue. I should swatch these as we go so I don't have to do it in the end. But again, if you have a dark blue in your palette, use that. If you don't, mix together blue and black. That should give you a dark blue. So that's what I'm starting with, the dark blue. Okay. Our next color is a bit more of a sky blue, so we want it to be lighter. So if you mix together blue and black, just use whatever blue you used without mixing black into it. I have a couple of blues here that I'm just going to mix together. And this should be just a slightly lighter blue. We're making a gradient here, so that's kind of the point. Okay, there's my next blue. And also, while we're doing this, I will try to answer questions in the comments as much as I can, but I do have to teach and paint at the same time, so if I miss your question, I apologize. I will try to get back to it later. Our next color is going to be turquoise. I have a turquoise in my palette. If you don't, mix a little bit of green into the blue. So make a new palette and add that blue that you just used, but mix a little bit of green into it. And that should give you a nice little turquoise here. So this is going to be a slightly lighter color. We're getting lighter here as we work our way down. Okay, there's our turquoise. You can see our ocean gradient is starting to come together. I got a question that says, how often do you have to replace your palette? So I actually don't replace the palette. I just buy tube watercolors, and as I run out of colors here, I refill with the tube watercolors. So that's how I keep the same palette. Okay, and then for our last color, we need a sand color. And so one mistake, if you've been here before, we've talked about sand. One mistake that people can make is to make really bright yellow sand, which is what we're kind of taught as children. And it will not look very natural on your painting. So sand is a very, very light yellow. You want to have just a little bit of yellow, maybe a little bit of brown. And then we're going to add a bunch of water to it. So you want to mix those two colors first, yellow and brown, black if you don't have brown, and then we're just going to add a bunch of water. And this will help to make it read a little bit more like sand. Show you how that looks once it's properly watered down there. That should be good. So you can see that's very, very watered down, very light. Once that dries, it'll look like sand, but it won't be bright yellow. Yep, every Saturday, same time. Do you ever have to mix colors? I'm doing it right now. Okay, so now that you have these colors here, do you recommend a specific brand of paper? I do like Arches. That is probably my favorite brand of paper, but it is a little bit more expensive, so I realize that that's probably not feasible for everybody. Strathmore is a great option too. Yeah, those are probably, Fabriano is good too. I do not change the water cup. Some people do, I am lazy. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to start, I'm kind of angling my paper because I'm right-handed and that helps. And we're going to start with our darkest color and work our way up to the lightest color. And we're just going to kind of put these in kind of a wave pattern. So if I draw this with my water here, it'll just be kind of a little wave pattern going across, and we're just going to kind of fill up about 1/4 of the paper with each color. So you're welcome to watch me do this if you want to kind of get the idea, and then you can do it afterwards. I'll give you time. Okay. And we want to do this relatively quickly. Don't worry about it too much, just so that all the colors blend together, okay? So I'm going to start with my darkest blue, give it a little bit of a wave pattern, and then just fill in everything else all the way up to the top. Like I said, I'm doing this quickly. Give my brush a really quick rinse, doesn't need to be all that good. Switch to my next color. Line that up right with that previous color. Let those blend together. Fill in the next 1/4 of the paper, so we should be about halfway. And switch to my next color, the turquoise. Again, blend that together with that previous color. You'll get these really cool kind of blooms and fun little patterns that the watercolor makes when it mixes together. Now, at the turquoise, before we switch to the sand, if you can remember, take a clean, damp brush and just blend out that edge of the turquoise just a little bit with clean water. You can see that I'm blending that out there. And then we can fill in the rest with the sand color. If you don't remember to do that, that is okay. But it just kind of helps the transition between the water and the sand. Okay, and there we go. Now, optionally, Once you're done, once you've got all of that painted in, you can add a little bit more if you want, if you've got spaces where it's not dark enough. So maybe I'll go back and add maybe just a little bit more of this dark color up at the top here. Make sure you're kind of using these strokes with movement, kind of like it's waves. You could also use a dry brush, so you could dry off your brush all the way with your paper towel and pick up a little bit of that paint to give yourself a little bit of texture. You could start kind of defining where those waves are going to be. Again, this is an overhead shot, so just imagine the waves are coming in. You can kind of start doing that. Up to you. And then once you're ready, and you can let it dry. Don't worry, I had to do all of that at the same time. I'm not going to move on until we're mostly ready to go, so you have time to finish everything that I just said. The reason why we do all of that at the same time is so that we get those blends. If I just did one color at a time and I waited, then you would get a really harsh line between each color. So that's the reason why I do all of those at the same time. I understand it was fast, but now I am done with the instruction for now, and you can catch up with me. And while we're letting it dry, feel free to ask any questions that you have in the comments. I will try to answer a few while I'm waiting for this to dry and waiting for everybody to catch up. We have no rush. When you add the tube paint to the little half pans, is it okay if they dry out? Yes, and they are supposed to dry out, and you can reactivate it with water. There's no problem there. Why don't you use a blow dryer? Sometimes I have before, but usually, we have time to just let it air dry, and also it gives me time to answer questions, and it gives everybody else time to catch up. So everybody else is welcome to use a hair dryer if you want. How do you help when things dry, uneventful, and look weird? That's just kind of a par for the course with watercolor. Like, you just have to kind of accept that things will dry a little bit funky, and that is part of the charm of watercolor. And there's a little bit of kind of a zen attitude that you have to take when you paint with watercolor, that it's not going to be exactly perfect. My smaller brushes keep getting curled. Any idea on how to prevent or fix that? My little brushes kind of get curled and frayed a little bit too. It just is what it is. And as long as it still works as a brush, it really doesn't matter too much. But if it bothers you, just trying to not mash them down in the bottom of your cup like I do probably helps. How do you know how much water to use? I always overwater, underwater, and always dries too quick. That is just a practice thing. I just kind of understand with my paints, I've used them for many years, how much water it takes and how saturated they're going to be. So really, I don't have, people ask me that, and I don't really have too much of a helpful answer for you. It just kind of is practice and a feel. What kind of brushes do you use? These are Princeton Neptune brushes. Again, all of my art supplies that I use and that I recommend are linked in my bio. There's a tab called Art Supply Recommendations. So you can check that out if you're looking for some new watercolors. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up my palette while we're doing this as well. Can I use textile paint for paper? I don't know, you probably could. There's no rules in art, you can do whatever you want. Do you have lessons on YouTube? I have all of these previous paint and sips that I've done. Numbers 60 through today's will be on YouTube, linked in my bio, and then before number 60, those are all on Instagram still. Same handle as TikTok, so that's how you can find all of my previous lessons. How do you make those lighter waves without the darker colors bleeding back in? Well, they do kind of bleed in a little bit, but because we switched to the different colors, they do kind of stay in their lane a little bit. You can see we have a really cool bloom going on right here, which is fun. This one too. Those are little places where the watercolor does its own thing. I don't do anything to control that. That just happens on its own. Are you doing another lesson after this painting? Nope, just one. I do one per week. Do you need a special canvas for watercolor? You do need watercolor paper. So Watercolor, as the name would suggest, means you're adding a lot of water to paper, which doesn't necessarily mix, especially if you're just using like printer paper or drawing paper. Watercolor paper is formulated specifically to hold a lot of water, and it does not have to be expensive watercolor paper, but it does need to be watercolor paper for you to have a decent experience with it. Does anything work for surface mixing paint? Ceramic plate, plastic, metal tin? Yep, all of those work. Ceramic actually is something that works really well. If you have like a ceramic plate or something like that. This is enamel. The mixing palette on the inside is enamel, so it works really well for mixing. Canson, I'm painting a gift for the friend. Yep. Can we move on to the next part? Nope, because it's not dry yet. So we're just answering questions. It's nearly dry, so we'll move on pretty soon. But you gotta be patient. This thing takes time. Do you prefer watercolor over any types of paint? I use 4 types of paint normally, just in my everyday art. I like to use watercolor, gouache, which is what this is, which is kind of a water-based opaque paint. I like acrylic and I like oil paint, so I kind of cycle through all of those. This is a beach scene. It's only about halfway done. And we're doing a little art lesson today. What size brushes are you using? So the one that I just used for the water background is a 12 round. Here we go. Yeah, 12 round. So it's a pretty big brush. You can see it in comparison to my hand there. And then for the waves, I'm going to probably use some smaller brushes. So I have this size 0 detail brush that I really like. I would recommend you get a nice small detail brush for your art. It is just helpful all the time. And then I have this 4 round brush that I might use as well. So for the waves, what we're moving on to, I'm probably gonna use my smaller brushes. I just started watercolor as therapy. Any tips for a beginner? Like how watery should it be? It just depends. Again, like I said, that is very much an individual thing. Like you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but just keep painting. There's nothing, and just stick with it and practice, and you'll kind of figure that part out. Cotton is very good. Yeah, I like cotton watercolor paper. Can you use other types of paint with watercolor paint? Yes, you can. Not necessarily like mixed in with the watercolor paint, but you can use gouache with watercolor paint. You could do a watercolor background and paint with acrylic over the top. You can do lots of mixed media things with watercolor. You can do pen and ink with watercolor. That looks really cool. Do you cut your own bookmark paper? Yes, I do. I buy sheets of Arches watercolor paper that's like 22 by 30 inches from the art store. And then I can cut those down into bookmarks or like smaller painting sizes or anything like that. Did you ever have a corporate job? Yes, I did. I graduated college and then I worked at Cincinnati Children's in pain research for about 2 years, a little over 2 years. And then last October I quit that job and now I am a full-time artist. Okay, so my painting is dry here. If yours is not, feel free to use a hairdryer to kind of speed up that process. And we're gonna start using our white paint to make the waves. So I'm gonna turn this sideways just because I am right-handed and this is a better angle for me. So you should still be able to see that. Thank you, Schmidt twins. And how are you recording yourself drawing? My phone on a tripod. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this white paint. Again, whatever white paint you have, gel pen, acrylic paint, gouache, whiteout, anything like that will work fine. We just need something opaque and that will go on top of these dark colors. So we're going to start with kind of finding where our first wave is going to be. And I like to put these kind of right where you can kind of see a difference between the 2 colors. So I can see this kind of dividing line right here. That's probably where this first wave is going to be. So I like to kind of just make a wavy, a little bit shaky line kind of going across where I want that wave to be. Maybe we'll do a little riptide thing going on with this bloom here. I think that looks cool. And this is just kind of determining where that wave is. So don't worry about this looking good. It's just kind of a shaky line. maybe we'll do kind of a riptide thing going on here because I think that looks cool. Now, on top of that line, kind of moving backwards, we are going to start drawing little bubbles. So I like to just draw like I'll show you closer up. See if I can describe this well. I like to just start drawing basically little ovals that connect to each other. I want them to not be perfect circles, perfect ovals. They're just going to kind of connect to each other like this. They're going to be different sizes. Little bubbles like this. And we're just going to do a small layer of these, probably about this thick, going back. And we're just going to work our way down. So I'm just kind of bouncing my brush around in a general oval shape and letting it kind of go where it wants. I'm not focusing too hard on making perfect shapes here. You can just fully fill some in as well if you want to just fill some in with white paint. That's good too. And I'm not sure how we're going to do that, so I'm going to skip that for now. I think I might end up kind of dry brushing that. Something like that. Yeah, okay. I'll figure that out later. So we're just continuing down our wave with those little ovals. This will kind of look like the sea foam that builds up at the edge of the wave. Okay, keep working your way down. Again, you should not be trying to make this look perfect in any sort of way. We don't want perfect shapes. We want kind of wiggly, irregular, different sizes and different textures and stuff like that. So if you do it quickly, that will kind of help too, because you can't make it perfect when you do it quickly. Keep working your way down. Sorry if I'm missing any comments as well. I'm focused. Okay. Now, once you get to the end, that's kind of our main texture. So what we're going to add alongside it are some little dots and dashes kind of in the front of the wave, so facing the beach. Just some little areas where there's like foam kind of spilling over the wave. Just little dots and dashes kind of in the front. And we're going to do that same thing kind of to the back here, so it doesn't just end. We're going to you can add a few more ovals back here, but we're just going to kind of add some more little ripples and again, just dots and dashes kind of back here too. You can see how that's kind of making the wave look a little bit more in the painting, if that makes sense, and not just painted on top. Do you print your art prints at home or order from a printing website? Mostly I print them at home. If I have a customer that wants a G-clay print, then I order those because I don't have the capability to make that at home, but generally I make my own, which I've enjoyed as a process for the most part. Dealing with technology is always a little bit of a struggle, but made it work. Okay, and we don't want to overdo this as well, so just kind of keep in mind where you're at. And then our final little texture that we're going to add to this is a dry brushing kind of texture. So you're going to take some paint in your brush, hold it flat, almost flat, so that you get a lot of surface area on the paint. Start in the beginning of the wave and just kind of drag this paint back. And you should get, I had a little too much paint on my brush there, but that's okay. I'll just show that close up. you should get these little areas where you get those paint breaks, and that's kind of what we're going for. So again, fill up your brush with some paint, hold it mostly flat so you get a lot of surface area on the paper, and just lightly start dragging it backwards. This is a size 0. It's a really small detail brush, which is helpful. You can also start at some of these little ripples that we made and drag some straight back from there as well for some little waves, kind of like that. Feel free to just add this as much as you want. This is my favorite texture that we do. I think it looks the most realistic. And watercolor is not supposed to be used on the white on paper, the white of paper. Yes, generally, like in traditional watercolor paper, you're supposed to use the white of the paper for highlights, but that would be very difficult to do in this kind of painting. So this is more of a mixed media painting. It's not a pure watercolor painting, and that is okay. It is not cheating. It's just a different style. Okay, that riptide thing probably needs a little bit of work, but we're gonna move on. Okay, so that's what it kind of should look like at the end. And you can keep adding all of these textures until you're happy with it. You can certainly overdo it, so just keep in mind that you should stop eventually. I'm saying that mostly to myself. And then, once you're happy with it, we're gonna move on to our next wave. So we're gonna do the same thing with our next, meeting between the lighter blue and the turquoise here, and then we're gonna do one more where the turquoise and the sand meet, and we're gonna do that there. So we're gonna do basically the exact same thing in those two spots. So we're gonna come up with 3 waves total. So again, use a nice shaky line to decide where your wave is. Another thing that you can do is kind of have a split where there's kind of 2 waves coming up. You can see here I've gotten it split. So you'll just do the same thing on both. You can see there, you've got kind of 2 waves. No, this is gouache. And then we'll do the same thing. Ovals, ovals, dots and dashes, dry brush. That's the order. And while we're doing this, just so you know, I gotta plug my stuff since you're here. I am a full-time artist. I sell my paintings mostly on Etsy. So if you'd like to check out my Etsy, that is linked in my bio. It does mean a lot to me for you to check that out. Even if you don't want to buy anything, just take a look, see if there's anything there that you like. My Venmo is listed in my bio and my PayPal is linked in my bio. So if you enjoyed today's session, we're still working, but if you're enjoying today's session and you'd like to leave me a little tip or a gift, that is always helpful. This is a full-time job for me, like I said, so that does help me pay the bills. So you can do that via the Venmo listed in my bio or the PayPal linked in my bio. I also have my art supply recommendations linked in my bio. So if you, again, would like my recommendations for art supplies, that's where you can find those. I've got lots of stuff in there, organized quite nicely, I've been told. So you can check that out. And yeah, this session will be uploaded to my YouTube, hopefully later today. And most of my previous paint and sips are on either YouTube or Instagram, same handle as TikTok. And my YouTube is linked in my bio as well. So those are all my plugs. And I do these every Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. So if you'd like to join me again, I'd love to see you again next Saturday. And I hope you're having fun so far. And if you have questions, I will try to answer a few of them here as well. Is it always watercolor? Yes. If we buy from your recommendations, do you get a commission? Yes, I do. I should say that more often, but yes, it does give me a small commission, and that helps me out as well. So it's a win-win. It does not cost you anything, and it helps me pay my rent. What's the difference between gouache and watercolors? So gouache paints are a little bit more, they're definitely more opaque, and so you can use them almost like acrylic paint, where they are more opaque and you can't see through to the next color underneath. Or you can water them down and they will act somewhat similar to watercolor. And they also will reactivate, which acrylic paint does not do. So it's a little bit hard to explain, but they are very fun because you can blend really well because they reactivate, so you can kind of blend the colors together more compared to acrylic. And you can also paint light onto dark, which you can't do with watercolor. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in my opinion. So I really love gouache, and I'd recommend you give it a try if you haven't yet. It's a great style of paint for beginners, especially because you can fix mistakes and, you know, yeah. My main thing is acrylic, but I love watercolor for relaxation. Yeah, I agree. Acrylic is tough because it dries so fast. I have a hard time with that. So I really like oil paint because it doesn't dry quite as fast. So that's generally been my favorite since I learned how to oil paint. I gotta gouache my hair. Nice. Well, it's water soluble, so you'll get it out of your hair. I usually get paint all over me when I am painting. All over my arms, at least. Have you used watercolor pencils? I have. I've made a couple of videos for them on TikTok, but they are not my favorite. I'm not really a pencil gal, I'm really more of a paint gal, and so it just doesn't really work for my style of art, but some people do really like them, so it's certainly worth a try if you're curious. You can find some pretty cheap watercolor pencil sets. Gouache has different colors. Yep, they have lots of different colors. They come in all the normal colors, just like any other paint, really. I've seen people prep gouache with an orange background. Is it good to do that for watercolor painting too? No, and that's a good question. So the reason why people will, including me, will tone their canvas with orange or any other color is because they're painting some sort of opaque paint on top. So I do that with gouache. I'll do that with oil paint or acrylic paint. But watercolor is a transparent paint. And so if you were to paint the background orange, everything on top would look very orange. And the tone canvas is just meant to kind of help you out with the beginning of the painting so that you can kind of see your values as you put them down on the paper or on the canvas. And you can maybe at the end, you can see a little bit of the tone through the final painting. But with watercolor, you would not be able to see the painting on top. It would be so orange. So that is a good question. Obviously, you are welcome to experiment with that if you want to give it a try. You don't have to take my word for it, and you can try watercolor painting, toning your paper orange first. There is no rule against that. I strongly encourage experimenting with these things, but that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. I think toning your canvas is a great tool to use for other types of paint though. I do it all the time. Are oil paintings bad for you, like Gamsol and all that? So oil paint itself is not. It is just oil. It's linseed oil and a pigment that is suspended in the oil. So the oil paint itself isn't really dangerous for you. Yes, some mediums that people use can be dangerous, turpentine and stuff like that, if you are breathing it all the time. So I think it just gets a bit of a bad rap for being dangerous, but it really is not, as long as you're smart and careful and you're not like pouring it down the drain or sitting there in an enclosed room with no airflow, just inhaling it for hours. So yeah, it's really not. It does take a little bit more work because the cleanup is a little bit more intensive, I guess, or just you have to do a little bit more work besides just pouring it down the drain. You can't do that. So it just takes a little bit of a learning curve, but it's really very doable for a hobby artist. You don't need to be a professional artist to use oil paint at all. Could you tone with other colors like gray or blue? Yep, you can tone any painting with any color. Generally, people use orange because it gives the painting a nice, like, warm glow from underneath. And especially for landscapes that usually have a lot of blue, it's the opposite color from blue on the color wheel. And so it's a great color to kind of contrast with that and make the blue stand out more. But yes, people can tone their canvas with any. I've seen artists on TikTok tone their canvas with like a really neon pink, blue, green. You can do any color. You just have to pick a color that you want to kind of be the like, imagine you're putting a filter on your painting and you want it to be a certain color. That's what color you're going to undertone it. How do you continue to strengthen your skills and to stay inspired? That's a good question. I mean, I paint every day, and really the only way to strengthen your skills is to paint every day, or not every day. You just have to paint consistently, I should say. It does not have to be every day. I do not paint every day. And challenge yourself to do new things. Don't be afraid of failure. And inspired, I don't know. I generally, like, I would say my main thing is that I don't paint if I really don't feel like it. And I think some other people will say, like, oh, you should paint every day even if you don't feel like it. That does not work for me. If I paint when I'm not feeling like it, I will make absolutely terrible paintings, and I will come out of it really frustrated and not fulfilled with that. So I am generally, if I have a day where I don't feel like painting, then I will do something else. I always have things that I need to do for my business, so I'll just switch to another task, and that generally helps. I think for me, if I were to force myself to paint every day, that would keep me uninspired, because it just, painting something is the result of inspiration for me. I don't get inspired by painting something when I don't feel like it. So I don't know if that was coherent at all, but that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Are you painting using a picture for reference here? I'm actually not. This is one of the rare times that I am not using a photo reference. When I first did this painting, this is for a Patreon gift, I believe. I kind of looked at a few reference photos of like overhead shots of the ocean, and kind of based my painting on that. And now that I've done that a few times, then I can kind of do this without a reference photo. But normally, for most of my paintings, I use reference photos. How do you motivate yourself to paint? I always want to paint, but I can't because I get distracted. I feel that. I get distracted as well. I've just always been an artist, and so I don't know if I have a good answer for this, because eventually, like, I want to paint again, even if I need to take a break for a few days. And so I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this, because it generally just happens. Like, it It's something that I really like doing, so it just kind of ends up happening. Thank you. I'm not an artist. Anyone can be an artist. I promise. I did not come out of the womb painting like this, and I have just enjoyed it since I was a kid, but all of my paintings when I was a child were all very age appropriate, like not masterpieces at all, and I've just kind of stuck with it. And it takes a lot of practice, but anyone can be an artist. I firmly believe that. If you enjoy it and you like it and you practice and you work at it, you will get better, just like any other skill. It is not an inherent quality that you have or don't have. I promise. Is it okay to use people's nature photography as a reference for TikTok, Instagram paintings? That's a good question. I usually so copyright is a bit of a tough situation because I really don't know the answer to that, but I try to use royalty-free reference photos for that kind of stuff, especially if I plan to sell my paintings. So there's a website called Unsplash, UNSPLASH, that I use that has a bunch of royalty-free photos and stuff, and so I try to use stuff like that where I know I'm not going to get in trouble for copywriting. If you're just practicing like by yourself at home, use whatever photos you can find on the internet. It's just the tricky part is when you're making money off of your painting, of using a different reference photo, where things could get a little bit tricky. So that's why for me, I make money on TikTok and I make money selling my paintings, so I don't want to get in trouble using someone else's art that they don't want me to use or don't want me to use to make money. So better safe than sorry. If you're just, like I said, if you're just a casual artist and you just paint at home for yourself, you don't have to worry about that. Use whatever reference photos you want. Please, the website again, it's Unsplash, UNSPLASH. Yeah, people have put that in the comments. Okay, we're really getting there. I think we're mostly done here. So again, you can continue to add this texture. I'm just going to kind of add a few final, like smaller waves down here that kind of overlap in the sand. Nothing like what we've done up here, just like kind of these wavy lines with maybe a little bit of texture behind them. Just as those kind of really small waves that kind of spread out on the beach, you know what I'm talking about? Just add a few of those, and then that will kind of be everything. I'm getting you out of here early today. So again, yeah, you can just keep adding all of these little details here as much as you want. Remember to kind of keep an eye on your final painting, kind of take a step back and say like, okay, I think I need a little bit more here, here, and here. But after that, I'll be done, because it can be really easy to kind of lose yourself in just making these waves and textures once you get the hang of it, and you can kind of overdo it. So just keep an eye on your painting and stop when it looks like it's done. Colorful umbrella on the beach. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's do that. Good plan. Clean off my brush here. Get the white out of my brush. Okay, let's do... So we can kind of be strategic about the colors that we put for the umbrellas here. Because most of our painting is blue, we want to use some warm colors to kind of contrast with that. So I might use some like pink or orange, something like that as your umbrella color if you want to paint an umbrella. So I'm just going to use a little bit of pink. Maybe I'll mix a little bit of orange into that. Yeah, something like that. And we're going to water this down. And then we're going to make a small, basically hexagon with slightly curved edges on the beach. Maybe a little bit more than a hexagon. We're going to try and make it a circle. Somewhat even. And you can always just kind of fix your shape as you go. There we go. That's not quite perfect, but that's okay. There's one. It's gonna look better if you make a couple, so it's not just like one random thing on the beach. So maybe I'll do an orange one. Maybe like right here. What size is the sketchbook? It is 9 by 12, and then the actual painted area here is 6 by 8. Maybe we'll do another pink one over here. Just kind of spread them out randomly on the beach. Go. Maybe a few towels as well. I think I'm just gonna stick with the umbrellas for now. I think that looks cute, but you're welcome to do towels in your own if you'd like. Okay, I think I'm gonna stick with that. Now, once those are slightly more dry, we're gonna take a darker color, just added a little bit of gray to what we just used. And once it's dry, water that down a little bit. You can do the little spines of the umbrella here and fill in a couple of those sections for a little bit of shadow. So I just connected all of the points to the center with this darker color, and I'm going to fill in a couple of these points just a little bit for this kind of shadow, like that. Make it look a little more 3D. The traffic almost sounds like waves. Nice. Excellent. How often do you do lives like these? I would love to paint along next time. Every Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Is there some rule about making something like umbrellas in 3? It's not a rule. It's just a general art guideline that the brain likes things that are in 3s. So when you want people to like your artwork, do it in 3s, or at least uneven numbers. 3, 5, 7, something like that. It just tends to, I don't know why. I can't explain to you the science, but it just tends to look better. For 300 likes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. How do you get watercolor on the palette for a bigger area, like for sand or the ocean? I just kind of go back and forth between the water from my cup and the paint, go back and forth, add more paint, add more water, until you get to a point where you have enough. I might add a little shadow for these guys too, because usually the sun is not directly overhead like this. Okay. There we go. You can keep adding little details to this. I might be overdoing this a little bit, but I'm into this now. I'm trying to figure out how to do this best. There we go. I think that's pretty close. Okay, and then for the shadow, we're just going to take kind of a blue-gray, so maybe mix a little bit of blue into black and then water that down a lot. We want it to be pretty light. And then you're just going to, let's see, the sun coming from this way, so I'm going to do the shadow on this side. Basically copy the shape, just slightly, you know, transferred to a different spot, if that makes sense. So mine's just kind of off to the side a little bit there, and you can kind of see that shadow coming in. So for this one, go here. Yeah, that looks good. There you go. There's your little shadow. I'll show that to you. Yeah, I can show the close up. There you go. That's what that looks like. I still have one little detail to add to that orange one, just to go over the supports again. There we go. So, put as much, you know, fun things on the beach as you want. I quite like the umbrellas here. I think that was a good idea. So whoever suggested that, nice job. I like it. Feel free to add little rectangles for towels, beach towels. Add as many umbrellas as you want. And I think that will be everything. I'm going to take off the tape so you can go ahead and stick around for that, because that's everyone's favorite part. If your tape rips your paper, heat it up with a hairdryer first. That will help the glue kind of soften, and it will release the paper. Thought it was starfish at first. Fair enough, it does kind of look like starfish. Hopefully it looks like umbrellas now. Do you ever put any turtles or animals in the sand? Nope, not for me, but you are welcome to do that if you want to. There we go. Alrighty, remember to sign your painting and put the date on it as well, so that you know when you did it. And again, my Venmo is listed in my bio and my PayPal is linked in my bio, so if you'd like to leave me a little tip or a gift, that is always appreciated. My Etsy is also linked in my bio, so if you'd like to check that out, you can do that. Check out what I sell on the side. Thanks, Aunt Lori. And yeah, this will be uploaded probably today onto my YouTube, also linked in my bio. And our next lesson will be next Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.